Okay, here we are live. Thanks for joining us today in our first edition of Soil Solver Live. We're pretty excited about this. I've got a little note sheet here to make sure I stay on topic. We want to take this time to discuss some of the soil tests we've been working through. This is John, this is Curt, both territory sales reps. I'm George Murray, president of ENP. We're here taking soil tests, helping superintendents, lawn care operators, sports turf managers solve their problems. And before we get started, let us know if you can hear us. Give something in the comments where you're from, what you listened to this morning on the way to work, what your favorite movie is, something to engage. For me, it was listening to a little bit of Tears for Fears and Celine Dion this morning. It was iPod Shuffle, so let's keep that rolling. John, what'd you listen to this morning?
Mostly sports talk radio, but a little bit of spectrum on the live streaming.
Nice. Curt, what about you?
I was catching up on the Urban Meyer saga mostly.
Okay, for you guys listening into Ohio State University land, I'm sorry about that. Hope it gets resolved. Anyways, so thanks for being on board. We've got about 20 minutes. If you have any questions that come up during our discussion, let us know in the comments. We'll be working to get back to them. We're going to probably work through answering some of those at the end. Would love to hear from you guys out there. So we'll talk about some tests today. It ranges anything from sports turf all the way to golf courses. And we're going to talk about a variety of kind of topics and issues that we see out there and solutions that we've had to come up with fixing those. So John, you want to start us off on your first example?
Yeah, absolutely. So looks like I kind of drew the short end of the stick here going first today. I'm going to go over a municipal sports turf soil test that was less than desirable. I think George is going to go through more of a professional sports turf example, and I think Curt's going to anchor us with a golf turf example. So without further ado, the test that I was going to talk about is, like I said, it's a municipal sports turf complex in the St. Louis, Missouri market. It was to kind of paint the picture, it was a new field construction that had a kind of lower to mid-level average CEC of about 16. And when we were out there pulling the tests, first got out there, noticed a lot of bare spots, some from being newly seeded, but also some from what was perceived to be compaction. So kind of first thoughts were, wonder if this is going to be a little high in magnesium, and we'll kind of touch on that a little later on. But as we were kind of putting the probe into the soil, it was so hard that we could not get in at all. I noticed the sprinkler heads were marked. Thought maybe those had a little excessive moisture, and kind of had to go around where the sprinkler heads were to actually get the soil probe to penetrate. So eventually we did get the test, and my hands were bruised for about a week and a half afterwards from the hard compaction from trying to get the soil probe in. So that's kind of the scene of this test that we were looking at. But as we kind of get into this here and we look at soil solver, there's kind of two parts to soil solver. You've got your exchangeable or your base saturation, and you've got your available or your saturated base. So when I'm kind of talking about this and saying exchangeable, I want you to be thinking about kind of what the turf is growing in. It's kind of the soil structure side of things. It's where bulk granular inputs go into. And on the available side, it's kind of more a snapshot of what the turf is and the root system, the rhizosphere, is actually seeing from an available nutrient standpoint. So that's really more where the liquid solutions come in. So kind of have that in the back of your head as we kind of go through this here. But I'm going to kind of put up this soil test just to show you. I know you won't be able to read it, but this is, you can see just how much red there was. Most of it was red, very little green. So there was two issues in particular that stood out in this test. The first was it was extremely high in magnesium, as I thought it would be on the exchangeable side. So one thing that is doing from a major standpoint is throwing off the ratios of the other base cations that we like. So I like to talk about this like the three bears in the porch. So if we look at the four base cations, we take away sodium, we've got calcium, magnesium, and potassium. So potassium is physically the biggest and only has one charge to hold the soil colloid. Magnesium is physically the smallest, has two charges to hold soil colloids, but that would be a tighter soil. And calcium is physically in the middle, has the two charges, and that's kind of just right. So you got your porch is too hot, potassium, porch is too cold, magnesium, porch is just right, calcium. So in this case, we had too much of the porch is too cold, way too much magnesium, and it was throwing off our ratios of the others. So on this test, we had 68% calcium, which we'd like to see maybe closer to 75. We had 26% magnesium, where we'd like it to be closer to like a 15. And we had 1.8% potassium, where we'd like to see like a 5 to 8. So in this scenario, it was really the magnesium causing some tightness issues. The other glaring issue was the sodium on the exchangeable or base saturation was 138 parts per million, where the recommended level or target was 21. So we had excessive sodium. It was also at about a 4% on that ratio side. On the available side of things, the sodium was 42 parts per million, where the target was 19. So we were over double on the available, and we were way beyond double on the exchangeable. So the two kind of big problems here were the excessive magnesium making things tight, and the excessive sodium causing a problem with soil structure as well. So kind of getting on to some of the solutions presented from these scenarios, the first thing that we recommended was a soil flush. So a good penetrant product that moves through the soil profile, like Hydro-Pak Command at 3 ounces, or Armament Concentrate at 1.5 ounces to pull some of those bad guys, as well as coupled with gypsum at a 5-pound rate. The other bulk granular recommendation from that calcium standpoint to try and mitigate that excessive magnesium was gypsum. The recommendation on the bulk side from the lab with this was 20 pounds of elemental calcium per 1,000. So I'd recommend to go out with gypsum as much as possible, as often as 1 time a month, to kind of touch on those sodium, bicarbs, and chloride, but also that the bulk side of calcium on the exchangeable. So those were kind of the two recommendations to mitigate those two problems. From there, we also recommended a good balanced NPK, a granular fertilizer of a 25-3-10 with Armament, alternated with a Healthy Grow 8-3-5 with Armament, because it was also low in organic matter. Again, that Healthy Grow has some natural calcium from egg-laying chickens. It also has some iron as well. So this soil test had a lot of red. We were trying to hit a lot of boxes with a couple of products here. Then on the liquid side of things, that available side, we recommended Growin, which is a nice 6-way combination of 14-2-4, Micros Plus, Armament P, Armament K, Promote, and Foundation 40. So with that, we were really hitting the available nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, boron, copper, iron, manganese, zinc, and also touching on the organic matter side of things. And then lastly, with the low numbers of calcium, we also threw in the Foliar-Pak calcium at 3 ounces to get that available calcium, as well as some good nitrate nitrogen as well. So that hit the nitrate, nitrogen, and the calcium. The last whole thing about this soil test is it had a pH that was starting to creep high that can sometimes lock up minor nutrients. So it was really important to have a regular dose of those minor nutrients in available form. So those liquid products were recommended on a every 21 to 30 day basis. So those are the issues that we saw with that test and the solutions that we presented.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thanks, John. Thanks for that. It's amazing how, you look at the ratios of the nutrients, how one nutrient being very high can cause a cascading effect issues in the soil.
Absolutely.
Certainly compaction when you have a lot of high magnesium, right? So if you're just joining us, we're going over 3 ugly soil tests today that we've identified in Soil Solver. John talked about number 1, sports turf place over there in Missouri, And I'm going to get on to the second one. It's another sports turf place, and this is a little bit different story. So where John was really hurting with a bunch of nutrients and especially magnesium being out of whack. This one here, when you look at the pH, which is 7.5, that's a little high. We like to see it at 7 or lower. CECs at 15.8, so similar CECs. Organic matter is a little low based off of that. The EC, the overall electrical conductivity, which is the amount of minerals that's in solution, is high. It's 1.2. We like to see it less than 1. And so, for me, when I look at this test, when I look at what's going on with this sports turf complex, that's a high EC, and we need to figure out why. So a little background on this site, though. This is a practice field for a professional football team, and they were a couple weeks out before the football team was going to start practicing on it. They needed to look really good and be able to withstand a lot of wear and tear. And when I looked at it on the exchangeable side, nothing's really out of whack. You got a little bit of low K, a little bit of low P, but nothing too crazy. Your sodium's a little bit high, but it's not crazy. So, that type of thing can be addressed with some NPK granulars. You would want to probably supplement a little bit of magnesium on this site because it's actually a little low. So there are some granular magnesium products out there that you can use. But when we look at the available side, we start thinking about, man, why is the EC, that high with what we're dealing with? You start looking at bicarbonates and you start looking at chlorides, and all of a sudden you realize bicarbonates are a little bit high on this test. We target's probably 106. We won't want it higher than that. It's 114. So that's not terrible. But chlorides were 257 when they should have been more around 80 parts per million. So you got a lot of chlorides there, which is kind of a little bit of good news because chlorides have a negative charge, can be flushed out of the soil profile fairly easily. The problem and catch here is that their well water that they were on, they're not running a very deep well, certainly had a lot of chlorides in the water. So, our thought process here was to come in, we need to address the organic matter, we need to make the soil a little bit healthier. So healthy grow granulars with some NPK. Again, the available nitrogen's a little bit low on this plot as well. So let's get some base. Again, get the exchangeable, get your nitrogen levels in the soil, get some healthy grow out there to build up the organic matter in the soil, and then come in with a nice penetrant. Our recommendations are Hydropak Command, but certainly there's a lot of other penetrants you could use in theory there. And then over the top, really, you've got a lot of what I call osmotic stress here, where if your electrical conductivity is higher in the soil, you're going to start having osmotic stress where that water literally gets pulled out of the cell and into the soil, right? So where is your concentration of minerals higher, within the cell or outside of the cell? And so this is, in situations like this, I really like to lean on some of our amino acid formulations, foliar amino acids, so we can really work on getting these amino acids to load up into the cell and keep water in the cell. That's a big science behind that. So grow in and play on were kind of our two tools. They were a little bit thin there in their stand. So we were going to start out with grow in to get them to get a thicker stand of turf there before they start to have play. And then in season applications and of play on, and continuing to grow in as needed. If the field gets beaten up, they can continue grow in on through. So that was really the strategy there. The low P, so even though P was fairly adequate on the exchangeable side, it was very low on the available side, which is really common. We see phosphorus locked up a lot. So it should have been 21 on parts per million on the available side, and it turned out to be 0.62. So another great thing about Grow-In, it's got a full biological content in it. It also has a lot of armament in it, which is going to work into that soil and is really going to help make nutrients like phosphorus more available. So that was kind of our thought process there. Of course, as John talked about, we've got a full NPK analysis on that and micronutrient analysis. So a lot of your micronutrients that are deficient, copper, manganese, zinc, boron, that all gets covered with Grow-In, as well as a little bit of nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium. So we really felt like that was a good tool to go out with. We were hoping and praying that we were going to get some rain. Again, a nice rain event can solve a lot of your problems if your water is suspect. So that was really what we went for, and I think that we found some good success there. And it wasn't a total train wreck by any stretch of imagination, but taking a soil test, going through these metrics and data, rather than just flying blind, I think can make a lot of difference between having a field that's good and having a field that's great. Okay, so we'll go on to number 3 again. If you're joining us just now, we've been discussing ugly soil tests through our Soil Solver app here, and you can see the red and green and everything in between that we have here. It's a single page sheet. It tells you everything you need to know in one page. So John went first, talked about sports turf complex. I went second, did another sports turf, and now Curt rather, is going to go and talk about the third test. Go ahead, Curt.
Thanks, George. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about a situation that I was able to help out with. It's a situation that's pretty close to me. I was able to monitor the situation and just watch the progress. We're talking about a golf green. It was kind of a new construction. And so it's bent grass on a sand-based soil. So with these new green situations, especially bent grass, there's a couple things to look out for that I think are really important in terms of just managing the situation. So new greens typically don't have much of a mat layer, an organic layer, compared to and especially compared to the other POA greens that the superintendent was managing. And so in terms of physical wear and mowing and rolling, you have to be careful. That bent grass is a little fragile. And the other thing in these new situations is you just need to feed more. It's just natural, especially with low CEC greens and greens that aren't holding a lot of water. So the superintendent this spring and historically has been having problems with there's actually a couple of new greens here, and he felt like he was feeding these greens enough, and I kind of disagreed with him, and I wanted to take him through the process of the Soil Solver report and building a program using our results. And then also making some adjustments on what he was doing with these greens from a cultural standpoint, mowing, rolling, those things. So June 7th, we got our soil solver report back. And the first thing I'm going to look at when I take a look at one of these reports is pH and bicarbonates. So our pH is high. And as mentioned, we can have a lockup of nutrients due to high pH. Bicarbonates are high, certainly have a lockup of nutrients there. And then again, the sodium and chlorides in this situation are high. And all these things are going to result in a situation where we're tying up nutrients. So, to begin and to add to that, there's not a lot of nutrient availability here. For the folks out there that can't see very well, John, George, will you vouch for me? There's a lot of red on this soil.
Yeah, in fact, you can hold it up. They'll see all the red. I mean, it's red's bad, green's good. That's,
Yeah. So those are indicators that we have deficiencies there. And so in effect, on the available side here, the only two nutrients that aren't deficient are calcium and sulfur. All right. So you've got an idea of what's going on here. Here's the solution that we put in place. First, we want to flush the gunk out of there. All right, we want to get rid of the bicarbs and the sodium and the chlorides, and we're going to do that with command. The superintendent had command on the shelf, and so we put an app of gypsum down, put command out, flush things. So we flush the gunk out of there. So now the applications that we make here are going to be much more available. All right. So the second step was to get an application, a starter fertilizer down, a granular, so we have a nice bank of macronutrients there. All right. The plant was sorely lacking. On the report, the nitrogen, both the nitrate and the ammonium levels were low. K is low, P is low. So that was a really good start. And then thirdly, we're going to put together a pretty simple foliar program, liquid program with weekly applications that's going to cover all these deficiencies that the soil is leaving us with. All right, so we went with an 11011 to supply the N and the K and a nice amino acid load. And then the Foliar-Pak miners, which is a complete micronutrient package, along with magnesium. Magnesium's a problem in this soil test for sure. I would have loved to have put out an application of ProMag or something like that, but the timing for the superintendent, especially in June, wasn't the greatest for that. So we'll work to supplement that magnesium with our liquid program. And then I wanted to get the CSI liquid into the equation here, because this bent grass has been kind of tortured and it's kind of fragile. So we want to build cell strength, and we want to strengthen the cuticle so it's able to withstand the mowing and rolling that it sees every day. And then armament P, we want that phosphorus. That root zone is pretty compromised. It's not picking up the phosphorus that it needs, especially from this woefully deficient soil. And then the last part of the liquid equation is armament MKS, which the superintendent had that in the barn, and it was a good way to supply potassium and magnesium and armament. So we have the 2 armament products in there that are going to loosen things up and make some of these nutrients that are tied up, make them more available over time. Okay, so that's our plan, and I've got to say that it worked very, very well. The before and after pictures from and the progress made happened very quickly. And we also backed this up with a follow-up soil test. So we did another soil test about 6 weeks later, and the statistics from the soil test really backed up what we were seeing visually there by really increasing available nutrient, the calcium, the magnesium, potassium, phosphorus, and several of the micronutrients all increased in their availability. So it's a good indication that we were on the right track. There's more work to do there, and balancing soils and fixing soils like this is a never-ending progress. But it's a pretty cool situation to be involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is why we created Soil Solver, and to help create tools for us and for our end users to be able to find success. I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. So that's it, guys. We went through 3 ugly soil tests, talked through what we did and the solutions and helps that we can maybe help some of you guys out there. If you haven't used Soil Solver yet, 1-page document that tells you everything you need to know. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way in this room, but I can tell you, I used to hate looking at soil tests. There was 18 billion pages. Every lab had a different format. They were all in a different language. And to be able to have all the data you need to make actionable responses in one single page, lit up red and green, tell you, for me, it's been a game changer. And for folks that have used it, I think they'd agree with that. So let's take some questions. I think we're mostly on time here, so let's take some questions from the field. If you guys got questions, we got, okay, here we go. Just don't mind that arm from behind the camera there. Okay, John, I'm gonna let you take this one. Why is the balance of calcium, magnesium, potassium in the soil so important? John kind of covered that, but go over it again in case people came in late. Or
it's kind of using the, I call it using the chemistry of those elements to affect the physics of the soil. So it really comes down to space in between the soil colloids. So calcium and magnesium each have a double positive charge. Okay, soil has a net negative charge. Opposites attract. So both calcium and magnesium can each, where my arm's on here, they can each hold a soil colloid each, right? So you're holding on to 2. Potassium has a single one by itself. So that would be kind of a, quote, looser soil. The magnesium being smaller than calcium is a tighter soil. So calcium, that's why it's kind of that just right size, along with the double positive charge to be a perfect flocculated soil or right. a good soil structure. So you need all to have a balance, but it's really about those percentages, which is why your target percent of calcium is close to a 75, magnesium is close to 15, and potassium is close to like an 8. So those are the reasons. It's, to put it short, soil structure.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, all these things are different sizes. Think of beach balls, baseball, softballs, whatever you want to put, and think about the pore size that goes in if you're connecting soil colloids with each one of those. And if you got a lot of magnesium, like John had in his test, and that's the smallest iteration of it, 2 charges, you're holding that soil really tight. I think that's where John's hands would probably attest to being a little too tight.
Were you a sign language expert in a previous life?
Yeah, I just needed a camera.
Possibly a T-Rex.
Yeah.
The arms here, maybe.
Yeah, I had, yeah.
Okay, next question. Where should I cover this one first? What is the turnaround time of these tests? We turn them around pretty quick, actually. I mean, I'm surprised how quickly we get going.
They hit the road, and a week later, we generally have the results.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's pretty quick. I mean, we're turning around. I was surprised when we started doing this how quickly we could do it. But yeah, about a week.
The
Plus minus.
the lab gets them, and they turn them around very quickly.
Yeah. So yeah, about a week is what I would say. If you have sales reps that really working it, great. If you're sitting on the results, it might be a week and 2 days. I don't know. Okay, are the target levels for exchangeable and available nutrients the same for all soil types? No, certainly not. So our target levels, the exchangeable target levels are built off of cation exchange capacity, and the available are built off of electrical conductivity levels. So that's kind of, it all fluctuates. So depending on if you have like a clay loam soil where your CEC is way up there, depending if you have a sandy soil or your CEC is way down, those exchangeable levels, the targets will fluctuate with those. Obviously, as your CEC increases, your target levels for the exchangeable will increase as the soil can hold more total. And then for the electrical conductivity, as that increases, certainly your target numbers increase and vice versa. So if your electrical conductivity is 0.2, your target numbers will correspond to that versus 1.2, or like we saw in a test the other day, 5 or 6. Yeah, I'm not sure what you're going to grow on that. Anyways, so it does. It varies depending on the soil type. What are some challenges for low pH soils? That's a good one. Yeah, so basically, when it comes to low pH soils, you want to be worried about micronutrient uptake, as in too much of it, right? So pH is all about that concentration of your negatively charged hydroxide ions and your positively charged hydrogen ions, right? And a lot of your micronutrients, iron, manganese, zinc, we're talking about their D3 transition metals here, are positively charged. So if you get a bunch of positively charged hydrogen concentrations when your pH starts to drop lower, it's a heck of a lot easier for the iron, manganese, and zinc and copper to hang out in their charged form, their positive form, and be taken up to the plant very readily, okay? There are some plants in the world that are genetically engineered and programmed to grow in low pH soils, and they actually release hydroxide ions at their roots, okay? Turf is probably mostly the opposite direction, where they're engineered to grow in higher pH soils and can actively release chelating agents that grab onto those metals. If you're growing turf in low pH situations, though, usually you're going to be worried about metal toxicities, okay? I had a test come back last year, growing on an old quarry where the pH was around 5, and they were actually getting copper toxicities. So tissue testing can solve that out. Doing a paste extract in your soil solver and to look at your available nutrients can help you kind of figure out if you got a lot of those things hanging out in the soil. But that's metal toxicities. And not only just metal toxicities, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, all those become less available as your pH starts to drop. So we see on soil tests, after we come across a pH that's low, we lime it, we follow up with the soil test after that, we see the availability on the available side with P and K and N shoot up dramatically when that happens. So this is why we generally say, hey, you want to be between 6.5 to 7, somewhere around there, maybe 6, because you've got a good availability of your micronutrients. And you also have a good availability of your boron, your nitrogen, your potassium, your calcium, your magnesium. All those availabilities start to creep up when you get in that 6.5, 7, 7.5 range. So that's a long-winded answer, but I'm telling you, low pH, you want to watch out for calcium, magnesium, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, even boron deficiencies. And you want to look out for iron, manganese, copper, zinc sufficiencies on the way to toxicities. Okay, that's it. Were there any questions that came through? Okay, so if you liked our video, and please like our Facebook page. There's a live subscribe button. Tap the live subscribe button, I'm being told. I didn't know that was even a thing. So tap it, follow it. We're going to do this again, hopefully. Would love to do it again. Every year have fun?
Had a great time, George.
Awesome.
Okay, well, on that note, we'll look forward to doing this again in the future. Thanks for viewing.
Thank you.
Thanks.